On a fall evening in 1973, Michael was driving alone along a country road in Cooksville, Maryland. He had driven this road many times before, but tonight felt different. The night was pitch black, and the only light came from his car's headlights, cutting through the darkness. The soothing jazz music playing on the radio helped calm his nerves, but a sense of unease lingered in the back of his mind. Recently, strange events had been reported in the area. Locals talked about seeing giant, insect-like creatures at night. Some people even claimed they lost track of time. Michael never believed such stories, but tonight he was about to experience something far beyond his imagination. As Michael drove further, a blinding light suddenly appeared in the distance. It shot down from the sky, straight onto an abandoned barn by the side of the road. Startled, Michael slowed the car and stared at the light, his palms sweating. The light was unnaturally bright, as if trying to pull him toward it. Just as he considered turning back, the car shook violently, and then everything shut down. The headlights, the radio, and the engine all stopped. Silence filled the air, thick and suffocating. Panicked, Michael tried to restart the car, but nothing happened. At that moment, a low, buzzing sound reached his ears. It was like the sound of insect wings, but much louder and heavier, as if a swarm of giant bugs was flying nearby. Michael's fingers trembled as cold sweat dripped down his face. He glanced outside, and through the dim moonlight, he saw dark shapes moving toward his car. They were tall and thin, with stiff, unnatural movements. He squinted, trying to make out what they were, but what he saw left him frozen in fear. Several tall, slender figures approached the car. Their bodies were thin and twisted, with long insect-like legs making faint clicking sounds as they moved. Their heads were large, and their eyes, cold metallic compound eyes, shimmered in the dark like those of a giant insect. These creatures, neither fully human nor fully insect, were like something out of a nightmare. Michael's breath quickened, and his body felt paralyzed with fear. The blue beam of light from the sky surrounded his car, and time seemed to stand still. He looked at his watch. Its hands had stopped moving. The entire world around him seemed frozen, except for the bug people getting closer. Michael's mind screamed at him to run, but his body refused to move. A strange, cold voice suddenly echoed in his mind.
"You are our test subject."
The voice wasn't something he heard with his ears. It spoke directly into his thoughts. It was cold and emotionless, as if dissecting his mind. Michael's vision began to fade, and the world around him disappeared into darkness. When Michael regained consciousness, he found himself lying on a cold metal table. His arms and legs were bound with soft but unbreakable restraints. The air was thick with the smell of rot and metal, like an old basement. Dim blue lights illuminated the room, casting eerie shadows over the metallic walls. He tried to move, but his body was numb, as if his nerves had been cut off. His vision slowly adjusted to the light, and he saw the creatures, those same bug people, standing around him. Their eyes, cold and lifeless, stared down at him as if he were nothing more than a specimen. Michael's heart pounded in his chest. He tried to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. He was completely at their mercy. A thin, long needle descended from a machine above him, glowing faintly blue. The needle pierced his skin, sending a wave of numbness through his body. He wanted to scream, but his voice wouldn't come out. What are you doing to me?" Michael's mind cried out in desperation, but there was no reply. The bugs held strange devices in their hands, gently touching his arms and legs. The air filled with a burning smell, like skin being scorched. Every time one of the devices touched his body, a sharp electric pain shot through him, and he could feel his nervous system slowly shutting down. Meanwhile, the cold voice in his head became clearer.
"You can be studied, can be copied."
Michael felt something crawling into his mind, like invisible tendrils searching through his thoughts. His memories started to scatter. Images of his childhood home, his parents' faces, and his friends' laughter, all being torn apart and exposed. These creatures weren't just experimenting on his body. They were tearing through his mind, analyzing every piece of him. He tried to fight back, to protect his memories, but the power invading his consciousness was too strong. All he could do was watch helplessly as his past was deconstructed and examined. Suddenly, Michael's mind was pulled into a new scene. He saw someone lying on another metal table nearby. The figure looked exactly like him. No, it was him, a perfect copy. The bug people were performing the same procedure on this clone. The body had no life, but its structure was identical to his. "What is this?" Michael asked in despair.
Your copy will replace you.
The voice coldly replied, echoing in his head. Michael's consciousness grew weaker as the scene around him faded. His body felt distant, his mind drifting into darkness. The copy, now fully awake, opened its eyes. It stood up, cold and emotionless, and walked toward the exit, leaving the real Michael trapped on the table. Michael's body went completely numb, and his awareness slowly slipped away, consumed by the overwhelming darkness. Days later, the copy returned to Michael's life in Cooksville. His friends and family noticed nothing strange at first, but as time passed, people began to mention how Michael seemed colder, more distant. He no longer laughed or smiled like he used to, but no one knew the truth that the real Michael's soul was trapped forever in darkness, while his copy took his place, slowly blending into human society. The bug people had succeeded in their experiment. By copying humans, they could study and control them, and Michael's fate had been sealed. His life forever changed.